Butterflies return someday.
Some roads women recognize before we even learn the names, the dates, or the history. Now, some of us do know it from history. Some of us know it from great grandmother who got quiet when certain men entered the room. Some of us know it from an auntie who they call crazy only because she told the truth earlier than they were ready to receive it. And some of us know it from church basements, from courthouse hallways, from family secrets, from hospital rooms, kitchens, kitchen tables where the women cleaned up the mess and were still blamed for noticing the fire. We're going to talk about a woman who changed laws for women and for people with disabilities. Now, Elizabeth Packard's story is not only about one woman wronged by one husband. It's about how law, medicine, marriage, religion, and public reputation can lock arms. They may not have agreed yesterday, but they agreed today and come against one person and then act a little shocked when that person learns how to fight back. So let's get into it. The woman they called incurable until she changed the law. Now, Elizabeth Packard was not simply a wronged wife. She was a woman who survived legal kidnapping, religious punishment, psychiatric labeling, institutional confinement, and the public burden of being called insane by men who wanted obedience. But Elizabeth Packard did not overcome one wound. That's not what she was dealing with. Now, she was a mother of 6, a thinker, a religious dissenter, a wife under the rule of a husband who believed disagreement, just disagreement, was disobedience. She was a woman living under laws that treated a married woman's mind as something her husband could explain better than she could. And when they tried to make her disappear, she did something dangerous. She remembered who she was. Now, Elizabeth Packard was born Elizabeth Parsons Ware, and this was back in 1816. Now, she married Theophilus Packard. Now, he was a Calvinist minister, and she married him in 1839, and they had 6 kids. And from the outside, life, especially looking at it from the lens back then, was great. But inside that house, there was something else happening. Elizabeth was doing some thinking. Not quietly enough for the comfort of the men around her, though. She began questioning religious doctrines. She explored beliefs outside her husband's strict Calvinist views. She spoke in Bible study. She formed opinions. She disagreed. She used her mind and spoke it in public. And see, in a world that we're still in, actually, where a woman's submission is often treated as evidence of virtue, her independent thought became suspicious. And see, that's one of the oldest tricks power knows. When it cannot defeat your argument, it attacks your stability, your character. How do people view you? So when she disagreed, she wasn't simply told, I disagree with you. We disagree here. She was told, in effect, the fact that you disagree with me, your disagreement proves something is very wrong with you. I consider that something being wrong with you. So in 1860, her husband had her committed to the Illinois Hospital for the Insane. Not because a jury had heard evidence, because they hadn't. She wasn't granted a meaningful way to defend herself, and she hadn't harmed anyone, not even him. Well, and I guess maybe his ego. But because the law gave her husband power, the law, and we got to sit with that for a second. That's not merely a private cruelty. This was not only a bad marriage, this was legal structure. Illinois law at that time gave men accused of insanity, the right to a hearing or a trial before commitment, if that needed to be done. And keep in mind, it was not for black men or indigenous men or any, group, a specific group of men. But married women could be placed in an institution at the request of their husbands. The cage had paperwork, the cage had respectability, and the cage had a lawful door. And Elizabeth Packard was taken right through it. She spent 3 years, can you imagine? 3 years inside the asylum. 3 years of being watched, questioned, monitored, surveilled, interpreted, told that her religious beliefs, her refusal to submit, her sharp mind, critical thinking, and her resistance were all evidence against her. The more she insisted she was sane, the more they could call her difficult. The more she protested injustice, the more they could call her disturbed. The more clearly she spoke, the more threatening she became. And that's how some systems and institutions work. They don't punish silence. They punish the kind of speech that might turn the light on them. But the thing is, while there, Elizabeth, she didn't simply see and feel her own suffering. This was an empathetic and compassionate woman. She noticed the suffering of others. And this is something that, her story really sticks with me. She recognized that she was not only fighting the laws confining housewives, she was fighting laws that confined anyone who could be labeled insane, people with disabilities, people institutionalized without enough protection, people whose letters could be intercepted, people whose testimony could be dismissed before they even opened their mouths, people whose humanity could be buried under a diagnosis, a label, or a man's signature. Elizabeth Packard understood something that many reformers didn't reach. The door that closed behind her had closed behind others too. So she connected the dots there. She watched, she listened, and she documented. She studied that system from the inside. While she had to be there, she was noticing things and taking notes. And the institution eventually got tired of her resistance. She wore them out. And eventually they released her and decided that she couldn't be cured. They did not release her clean. They released her with a label meant intentionally to stain her for the rest of her life. Incurably insane. A phrase dressed like a medical conclusion, but carrying the weight of lifetime social exile. Incurable. Incurable. No one was saying, oh, we misunderstood. We were mistaken. Clearly, she's been doing this for years. She's been matching wits with us. She's been fighting this long. This woman is not insane. We made an error. Nope, incurable. So they put her out, but they tried to make sure that that label followed her like a shadow, because sometimes power will open the door only after it writes something on you that everybody can read. And when Elizabeth returned home, she was not restored to safety. Her husband confined her again. Now I had to go back and check this part, because I always thought that Elizabeth Packard came home to an empty home and the husband was gone. But, fact checking, that's not exactly what happened. Let me give you the sources here. In 1863, when she was released and she was incurably insane, the National Women's History Museum and the Illinois History and Lincoln collections both assert she returned to her husband, and he then imprisoned her in their home, locking her in a nursery with windows nailed shut. Wow. And so, I was thinking, well, if the windows nailed shut, how'd she get out? I guess she was able to write. From my research, she was able to write letters, and maybe maybe friends were looking out. And eventually, there was a habeas corpus, a writ of habeas corpus. Is basically the court saying, produce the body, right? Bring her here. Show us the person you are holding and justify why they're being confined. And it wouldn't automatically make her free or anything, but it does, kind of break that isolation to say, we need to intervene, and let's all come together around this. So after the jury declared her sane, she did go back home and discovered that Theophilus had left with the kids, with their children. Now, several sources say he had sold the home, something, taken her money, her belongings, her wardrobe, her furniture, but most importantly, her children, and moved everyone to Massachusetts. And the University of Illinois Press says he had left before the trial ended, and taken their young children and all of her personal property and things, and he was gone. So he had sold others say, he had sold the house. So basically, Theophilus was just bound and determined to take everything because she dared to disagree with him. But in the aftermath, Elizabeth Packard accomplished something a lot larger than personal vindication. She turned one woman's confinement into a national argument about liberty, marriage, disability, mental health, due process, and the right for women to be heard. So here were her major accomplishments, just to sum them up. She exposed how easily a married woman could be confined. She helped change commitment law. Illinois passed a law in 1867, often associated with her work, known as the Bill for the Protection of Personal Liberty, or Mrs. Packard's Personal Liberty Law. It guaranteed that people accused of insanity, including wives, had the right to a public hearing before being confined. And that's the legal heart of her victory. She helped force the law to stop treating a husband's accusations as like the final word. She also fought for people inside institutions because, she could have easily simply focused on what she was doing, and that we would have called that focus. She understood, though, that the issue was bigger than housewives. People labeled insane could be isolated, disbelieved, silenced, and stripped of contact with the outside world. She had seen that happen. She had seen all these things happening right up close. Her reform work addressed asylum power, patient rights, oversight, and the ability of confined people to communicate. She also created organized resistance. After discovering that Theophilus had taken the children, the property, money, wardrobe, furniture, and left the state, she didn't have very much legal recourse because of married women's limited rights, at that time. So out of that devastation, she did something I think was admirable. She got to work. She put all of that. She poured all of that into her work, and connected with other folks, and formed the Anti-Insane Asylum Society. And that's powerful. She didn't just write a grievance. She built an entire vehicle. She published books and used testimony as strategy. Remember I told you she was taking notes while she was there? So she wrote and published several works. I'm not going to read them off here, but I'm going to have them on the sites. She influenced reforms beyond Illinois. Her work is credited with helping pass similar protections in other states because, as you can imagine, as I can imagine, because, like I said, I don't think we've come out of this way of thinking at all, that women, that women do not have the right to disagree without punishment. But this may be one of her deepest accomplishments. She forced people to ask. Just stop and ask. Is this person dangerous? Or is this person just being disobedient and disagreeable with someone we're used to seeing as he who cannot be disagreed with? So is this illness or dissent? Is this protection or punishment? Is this care? Is this care, real care, or captivity? And that question still echoes today. Anywhere people are labeled unstable, difficult, hysterical, non-compliant, simply because they refuse domination. So when we disagree in public, we're not just arguing. We are protecting the doorway of our own minds. When we lose friends, we know it hurts, but as long as we don't lose the most important thing, the irreplaceable thing to us, we can't lose ourselves. When we stand alone, we're alone, but we got a little company, the truth. When people say, why can't you just let it go? We remember how many women were buried under that sentence. When people say you're making too much of this, we remember that confinement often begins with someone deciding a woman's perception is inconvenient. So for some women who understand you can take so much from me, but as long as, I'm left with me, I'm good. I will not apologize for my discernment. I will not shrink my knowing down to a size that comforts people who are benefiting from my silence as they walk around. I will not pretend that disagreement is cruelty. I will not confuse social approval with safety. I will not let loneliness scare me back into obedience. I can be warm and still be unmovable. I can be gracious and still be gone. I can love people and still refuse the script they wrote for me. I can lose a room, but I can't lose my soul. I can stand by myself and still be standing with entire generations. See, because some women that came before me, they were called mad, bitter, difficult, incurable, ungrateful, insane, too much, and not right. But sometimes too much was the first honest thing they ever said. Too much to fool, too much to cage, too much to hush, too much to dress up in obedience and parade it around and call it peace. I bless the women who carried their names after the world tried to stain them. I am thankful to the women who got out with nothing but a voice and a witness. I'm thankful to all those women whose letters escaped before their bodies could. I'm thankful to women who are turning pain into committees, testimony, law, books, warnings and road signs for all the rest of us. We are allowed to disagree. We are allowed to notice. We are allowed to leave. We are allowed to stand alone. We are allowed to speak before everybody else catches up. And if they call that mean, it's been worse. Our freedom has rhythm. Our mind has backbone. Voice. Oh, it has ancestors. And we didn't come this far. We did not come this far to be sweet talked back into a cage. This is Tanya G.J. Prince. Thanks for listening. Y'all be great.